I never worked in a waterfall process. Well, of course that's a lie. I mean, I've never worked in a waterfall process where we actually agreed and admitted to it being a waterfall process. I've worked in numerous companies where we worked agile within the gates in a stage gate model. We had what people call water scrumfall, a lot of analysis up front, some agile iterations, and then a lot of testing and integration afterwards. Hi, my name is Aino Corry, and I'm a co-host in Dave Farley's Continuous Delivery channel. Welcome to this channel. If you've not been here before, please hit subscribe, and if you enjoy the content today, hit like as well. Before we begin, a thank you to our channel sponsors, Equal Experts, Tricentis, Transfix and Ice Panel, all of whom help us grow the channel and provide products that align very well with what we discuss in this channel. When I started working as a developer more than 20 years ago, we worked in a purely agile process. We worked with XP, we worked with pair programming, we worked very iteratively and in super small increments, smaller than 2 weeks. The company I worked for even designed some pair programming tables with help from Kent Beck. Ironically, my first job as a teacher in industry was actually to teach Java programming in the ROP process, which is actually very much a waterfall process. At the time, I didn't think that that was a problem at all, even though we would never work in such a process in our company. I could see the point of a waterfall process where you can actually plan exactly what it is you want to make, and then you can analyze how long it will take, and you can make the design, and then you make the implementation, and then you put all the implemented parts together, and then everything works in the end. At the time, I couldn't really see a problem with it, and the people that I was teaching this couldn't see a problem with it either. Of course, I'm immensely embarrassed about that now, but I was young and I needed the money. Now, since I've been working in some sort of agile way for the past 20 years, I should probably know what to say to people who are skeptical about agile processes, shouldn't I? Especially since I've been an agile coach for the past 10 years or more. And with an agile coach, I mean somebody that the management has invited into an organization to make people work in the agile process that they have decided they should work with. Or at least that's what most agile coaches do. I know that there are also some adventurous agile coaches who go out and modify the process that the management decided that people should work under. They change it to something that fits the developers better. I think that's a brilliant thing to do. But you don't always get that choice as an agile coach. Not all agile coaches can do that. So I do understand that there's skepticism around the concept of agile. I know that even Dave Thomas, who was one of the people who wrote the Agile Manifesto, started talking about how agile is dead more than 10 years ago. What he meant was that the way we're using agile processes now does not work. He says that agility is more interesting. But what does he mean by that? He means that instead of following an agile process to the letter, you should instead think about the agile principles behind it all. There are 12 agile principles. The first is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through early and continuous delivery of valuable software. Number 2, welcome changing requirements even late in the development. Agile processes harness change for the customer's competitive advantage. 3, deliver working software frequently, from a couple of weeks to a couple of months, with preference to the shorter timescale. 4, business people and developers must work together daily throughout the project. 5, build projects around motivated individuals, give them the environment and support their need, and trust them to get the job done. 6, the most efficient and effective method of conveying information to and within a development team is face-to-face conversation. 7, working software is the primary measure of development. 8, agile processes promote sustainable development. The sponsors, developers and users should be able to maintain a constant pace indefinitely. 9, continuous attention to technical excellence and good design enhances agility. 10, simplicity. The art of maximizing the amount of work not done is essential. 11, the best architectures, requirements and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. 12, at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. That's basically retrospectives. But unfortunately, the 12 principles are very long to read for people, so they don't read them. It's much easier just to look at the Agile Manifesto. It's only got 4 different points. Individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Working software over comprehensive documentation. Customer collaboration over contract negotiation. And responding to change over following a plan. But these 4 points are easily misunderstood in both directions. Famously, we have the Manifesto for Half-Assed Agile Software Development by Kerry Buckley. This adds some extra text to them. For example, responding to change over following a plan, provided a detailed plan is in place to respond to the change and it is followed precisely. The subtext to the Manifesto for Half-Assed Agile Software Development is, while the items on the left sound nice in theory, we're an enterprise company and there's no way we're letting go of the items on the right. But I also see skepticism arising from a misunderstanding in the other direction. It's much easier just to read the Agile values, and if we look at the last one, we value responding to change over following a plan, that is very easily interpreted as when you do Agile, you don't need a plan. Because of this, we have people claiming that when we are Agile, it's anarchy, because we never plan anything. And I hear people laughing at me when we talk about planning, and they say, "Oh, Aino, I'm sorry we're planning, so we're not as Agile as you want us to be." It really makes me angry when people say that, but luckily I've worked with my anger management, so they don't notice anything but the holes in the walls and the hallways. But the point about this Agile value is that we value responding to change over following a plan. It doesn't mean that we don't have a plan or that we don't try to follow the plan. Agile doesn't mean that you don't have a plan. It means that if you have a plan, you should accept to embrace changes to that plan. Actually, I think that making a plan is brilliant. No matter how Agile you're working, it's a very good idea to think things through as far as you can. But then you also have to accept that even though you want to think things through, you shouldn't dive into analysis paralysis and try to think about all the different eventualities that might arise in the future. You should make an overview of the plan, and then the closer you come to the different milestones in the plan, the more detailed the plan can be. It's a little bit like the way that we look at backlogs. We say that the tasks described in the backlog need to be more and more precise the closer we get to top priority of the backlog. And the further we are away from the top priority, the less detailed the tasks can be described. But the problem is that people read the principles in a shallow way and misunderstand what being Agile is about because they just see that, oh, we can't follow a plan. So that was my rant about point 4 in the Agile Manifesto. Next I'm going to work backwards and tackle the third. We value customer collaboration over contract negotiations. Oh, okay, so we can't make contracts with our customers, you say. The only thing that we can do is chit-chat with the customers every other week, and that's the way that we can make the system. That's also not correct. It's quite okay to negotiate a contract, but when you are negotiating a contract with somebody and you want to work in an Agile way, then you of course have to tell the customers that you are working in an Agile way, and that means that we're trying to learn and that we're now creating the contract with some flexibility. There's a lot of debate about Agile contracts, and I'm not going to go into detail with them here. Moving backwards in the Agile Manifesto, the previous point is we value working software over comprehensive documentation. Does that mean that we shouldn't document anything? No, you've learned it now. No, you can definitely create documentation, but you have again to accept that the working software will change and the documentation has to change with it. Often the best way to do that is to either make the documentation in the code as comments or some sort of annotation so that it changes with the code. Alternatively, you just have to revisit the documentation whenever you change the software. Otherwise, the documentation will be stale and nobody will read it, and it will have been a waste of time to create it. I know that some people have started feeding their code into ChatGPT, and then the ChatGPT will actually make a very nice documentation of their code. It could potentially be a bit dangerous because you do not know where your code goes when you give it to a chatbot. But if you don't care about that, that might be a way to actually keep your documentation up to date. And the last, or the first point is, we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And this is an interesting one. If it is true that we value individuals and interactions over processes and tools, Why is it then that some of the Agile coaches say that if you don't follow this process completely, then it doesn't work? Why is it then that people sometimes say that the tool Jira is what makes them agile? What happened there? The problem is, I think, that it's much easier to use processes and tools and have rules for those things than it is to actually value individuals and interactions between individuals. When you have some individuals that need to communicate and you want to make sure that they do it in the right way, it's much easier to make them follow a rule set. And then if something goes wrong with the communication, you're thinking, oh, we should add some more rules to this. We should put some more processes into this. Maybe we should use another tool to check just how many hours you spend on this task. And then something goes wrong again. And then they say, oh, we need more control. We need more processes. We need more tools. And then what happens in an organization like that is that processes are like scar tissue. An analogy is that if you cut your hand, your skin creates scar tissue to make your skin a little bit stronger, so that if you cut your hand again, it'll be more resilient. And the more you cut your hand, the more scar tissue you get on your hand. But when you get a lot of scar tissue, you're not very flexible anymore. And rigid processes are like scar tissue in an organization. Whenever something goes wrong, you create another process in order to prevent this failure from happening again. But the more processes you put into an organization, the less agile it gets. And that is why instead of just adding more processes, we actually need to add more interaction and communication between the people. But that takes time and that's difficult, and it's easier just to create more processes. And for me, that's probably one of the things that it's most difficult about introducing agility in an organization. I can easily make people understand that plans can change by showing them how their own plans have changed previously. I can show them that contract negotiation is not as valuable as customer collaboration, and how it can work better with demo sessions or better reviews with stakeholders. It doesn't take many meetings to prove that the value of what we do becomes better with better communication. And they already know that comprehensive documentation that is always right does not exist, and that working software is the only thing that is correct all the time. But the last point about valuing individuals in interactions, that is the hardest thing for me to convince people of in an organization. For some reason, people are not able to communicate about things like API between systems or how to hand over systems between developers and operations. And I know that there are more organizations now where we have a very good collaboration between developers and operations, but it's not like that everywhere yet. And in general, when people are placed in different teams, the other colleagues quickly becomes the other people and communication becomes harder. But instead of just creating more and more processes and communication layers and tools between these people, what we should do is that we should remove all these things and enable them to communicate with each other, to find a way for them to communicate maybe even every day or maybe every other day. The actual human beings need to communicate with each other and to say out loud if something is stalling them. And here it comes back to the daily Scrum meeting, the stand-up meeting, that some people hate for various reasons. They think that it's a complete waste of time, and some days you might not get something out of the daily stand-up meeting, but the daily stand-up meeting is there for a reason. And instead of just following the process, you should ask yourself, why do you have this meeting, and what are you supposed to get out of it? You're not having the daily stand-up to talk about what you did in detail and not to talk about how many meetings you're going to today. But it's a forum to talk about things that you need help with, or questions that you have, or things that you're wondering about. And having those very short daily meetings is so important for people to work together. I remember once I talked to somebody who was a manager in a company that made a new browser that was much quicker than the existing browsers on the market. And I asked him if they were using an agile process, and he said, no, we hate agile, it's the worst, it's a complete waste of time. Okay, I said, so what are you doing then? How are you communicating? Well, obviously, he said, we're communicating every morning, just very shortly, just to make sure that we're on the right path. Okay, I say, right, okay. How do you make your plans? Well, we do make plans, he said, but we revisit them every week just to make sure that we're going in the right direction. Okay, and how about your communication with the customer? Well, of course we're communicating with the customers. We're showing them what we have from time to time so that we know whether we're going in the right direction or not. And we aim to have the software always be shippable. We're shipping a new version to the customer every few weeks. And then I asked him, how is this not agile? Because we're not doing Scrum. And this is one of the biggest misunderstandings, to say that Agile is always Scrum and Scrum is always Agile. You can definitely use Scrum in a waterfall process. You can use Scrum as a way to support project managers into seeing exactly what people are doing and how many hours they're using it to do it. And you can plan sprints months ahead of time. You can also definitely do Agile development without using Scrum or any other documented process such as Crystal, DSDM, ASD, Lean, Kanban, XP or AUP. The core idea of Agile, besides all the principles, the values and the processes, is inspect and adapt. If you are inspecting and adapting to what you find out, then you are being Agile. But in order to do that, you actually need to inspect. You need to be able to see how things are working. So you need that openness from the people working. Perhaps a Jira board with the flow, or you need to have demos with the stakeholders, or you need to have management knowing what's happening. Not how many hours you've spent, but what's actually happening. You need that inspection. And then you need to be able to adapt to the situation. And adapting to the situation means that you can react to what you see when you inspect. But the problem is that there are so many things you need in order to be able to adapt. You need to trust from management and you need trust from the customers to change the functionality that you promised into something that is better. And you need the management to actually invest in Agile development by supporting continuous delivery. Because if you do not have continuous delivery, or at least continuous integration, you cannot be Agile. Because in order to adapt the software, you need to have the courage to change the software. And in order to do that, you need to know that when you make a tiny change somewhere, it doesn't mess everything up. So we actually need technical Agile support in order to be truly Agile. There's no real agility without technical agility. And that means that you have to strive for the continuous delivery that this channel supports in order to have real agility. So, in summary, I see organizations claiming that they're Agile because they make people stand up 15 minutes every morning and they use Jira or Azure DevOps. But if you do not give people the trust and courage and testing infrastructure to change the software, you're missing the point. And then you're Agile in name only, which acronym, funnily, is my name, AINO. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in learning more ideas and techniques for teamwork and leadership in tech teams, check out our teamwork and leadership playlist that you can see here.